Hey, everybody. My name's Chris Carter. This is Beyond the Stage. I'm the executive director of Livermore Valley Arts, the Bankhead Theater. And we're talking about a performance coming up at the Bankhead on May 15th that we're very excited about.
15th.
March 15th, excuse me. I knew it was an M. This is why we have Ruth here. But on March 15th at 7:30, it's a Wednesday. It's the George Bowen Master Guitar Summit in support of the ALS Cure Project. And I'm really lucky to have a few special guests with us today. To my left is Ruth Egherman, who's our marketing director.
Hi there.
And we've been working feverishly on getting the word out about this really cool concert. And then across from me is George Bowen, luthier and musician. And if you don't know what a luthier is, it's a guitar builder, constructor, an artist that makes guitars. And then Mike Piscotty, who's the founder of the ALS Cure Project. And this event is going to be very cool. It came together kind of quickly. So at first I wanted to maybe just start with that and just talk about how we got this going. So I'll just tell you my story really quickly is that I saw Carla Brown, the mayor of Pleasanton, and it was at an event or something at the Bankhead, and she said, "Do you know George Bowen?" And I said, "I've heard his name, but I don't know him because I'm a guitar guy. I know who he is, but I've never met him." And so she told me a little bit about what was going on and said there might be an opportunity to do a concert at the Bankhead with some of these guitarists. And I said, well, let's figure it out. And so she arranged for a meeting with the three of us, but I'm not quite sure how she knows the two of you. So why don't tell me a little bit about your side of the story of how this all came to be.
Well, go ahead, George.
I'm George Bowen. Thank you for having the concert and doing this for the community and for those afflicted pals. We call ourselves. I'll get it out front that I was diagnosed with ALS, and so I'm especially grateful for Mike and what he's doing, and he'll get into that. But I've been a guitar player since at the beginning of my memory, really. So in my 30s, probably. No, I picked up a guitar when I was 7 or 8 and played the guitar. And in my teen years, I can remember probably 15 or 16, that might date myself. I can remember hearing the Simon and Garfunkel song, The Boxer, played on the air for the first time. And the opening guitar passage to that had such an impact on me that it made me want to figure out how. I thought it was Paul Simon. It wasn't Paul Simon. It was a guy by the name of Fred Carter Jr. But that got me started really seriously pursuing the guitar. And I did that for many years, formed a band in those years. We performed, I was living in San Diego, performed, the venues kept getting bigger, audiences kept getting bigger, and then we thought we were done with the music business and went into a recording studio to record a few original songs that we had done. And unbeknownst to my, it was Bowen and Richards was the band, so unbeknownst to Richards and me, the engineer took some of our tapes to a friend of his who was president of a record company in LA, and we got a record deal out of it, which was, kind of everybody's
right.
If you pick up a guitar, that's your dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. So roll forward a few years, and we moved to Los Angeles. Had some success with the first album. Some Billboard magazine liked us a lot and wrote some great reviews, and we made the charts. And you start getting fan mail, and you think, maybe we're going somewhere here. And but where we were going was I did some studio musician work as well, and continued practicing the guitar like fury, and the lifestyle in Los Angeles wasn't the lifestyle for me. Every recording event, every studio gig, had drugs involved, and I mean, these are the top players. I won't mention any names, but they're the top players, and I was delighted to be in their company, and had that feeling like I don't really belong here with musicians like these. But I didn't. I'm a more conservative person that just wanted a family, didn't want to be on the road, and didn't want that influence. So,
are you from the Bay Area originally? Is this where you grew up out here?
I was born in Oakland.
Oakland, okay.
But moved to San Diego when I was about 4 or 5. So I have very few memories of my early years in the Bay Area. But we moved up here. So I left the music business, went out and got a day job, and that day job turned out to be a good career. And late in that career, I was fortunate enough to be able to retire early, and I continued playing, but I became curious about building guitars and had developed some friendships with some great guitar builders, and started building guitars about 13, 14 years ago. And more recently, some professional guitar players, actually 2 who are in the show, play Bowen guitars, and there's so many great guitars out there. It kind of amazes me that my guitars are their choice of guitars, and so if you come to the show, you're going to see a couple of George Bowen guitars on stage, and it's really at about the time I was diagnosed. Technically, I was diagnosed January 10th, but I think we really knew in October. And Carla's a good friend. Carla Brown's a good friend. I've known her for many years, and I mentioned to her, and I think, and both of these guitar players said, we'd love to do a concert for you. And so I just mentioned that to Carla, and I think really some magic happened behind the curtain with her connecting with you, and she had just read the Pleasanton Weekly with your article in it, Mike.
Yeah.
And so I'll maybe turn it over at this point, and that's...
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And then, so Mike, did Carla reach out to you then?
Yeah, there I was driving home to Pleasanton in the car, and I got a call from Carla, and she said, "Hey, there's this fine gentleman, George from Pleasanton, and he has ALS. He's a guitar maker, and they're interested in maybe putting on a concert." I think she may have already talked to you and Chris, and boy, we just seemed like the perfect thing to do, right? And we got together and started hashing it out, and just amazed with George and his friends that really want to come here and celebrate and put this show on. It's fabulous. I'm grateful to be around all of you guys, and really lifts us up as we're doing this work to get this type of support. And I'm just so proud and grateful of this courageous guy next to me here, because this is not an easy thing to do, is put yourself out there in the limelight with this disease, and just so proud and grateful to know you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah. And tell me more about the ALS Cure Project and how this got started, and what your goals are, and what you're trying to do with the funding.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. So, I come into the ALS community as a CAL. So George had mentioned PAL. So in the business, a person with ALS is a PALS, and a caregiver for someone with ALS is a CALS. And so I was a CALS for my wife, Gretchen, who got ALS in 2016. She started experiencing drop foot. And after a number of different tests, and it takes many months to rule everything else out, and when you kind of get to the end, what you have is ALS, when you have none of the other neurological diseases that they're testing you for. She was again diagnosed, I think, in 2016. She passed in May of 2018, and relatively quick progression. Most people are kind of averages 3 to 5 years expectancy after diagnosis, and we shepherded her through that. Along the way, we had some nice support. We had, she was very brave and courageous, like George here. And we had ESPN came in and did a story on us because my older boy, Steven, who played for the A's and Cardinals, was involved with a big trade from the Cardinals to the A's so that he could shepherd Gretchen in her last, few months. And I'd always ask Gretchen, I said, are you okay? If with, cameras coming in, because she had all the breathing devices and everything on, and it wasn't her best light. And she always said, as long as nobody else has to suffer my fate, bring them on. So we did. And after she passed, it was a promise that we had made to her to try to come up with a cure for ALS. And that was really what kind of spawned us to look into how could we help in this field.
So my wife knew your wife. I think I might have told you this. So she went to boot camp every morning, and your wife was at the same exercise class. And so I remember my wife telling me the story of your wife as she was going through all this, and we were following that. And we did follow the news when your son was able to come out here. We thought that was really great that the baseball teams and the baseball gods helped make that work out.
Yeah, it's a good trade for the teams, and good trade to our family too.
Yeah. So, and then are you raising money for research or for care, or what's kind of the goals of the organization?
Chris, when we started out, our goal was to get to a cure in some manner, and we didn't quite know where we're headed. We started learning things about the disease more, that, it's a rare disease that, 6,000 people in the U.S. get it diagnosed every year. About 6,000 pass. About 18,000 people have it. And so it's a lot smaller number than the number that have cancer, maybe 2 million or so, right? And so there's some challenges in that. People at times can be maybe a little more philanthropic for diseases that have touched them personally. So just by the fact there's less numbers, it's a little bit more challenging to raise money in there. Learned that. Also learned that there wasn't a test for ALS. There isn't something I can take from your body, blood or whatnot, and say, you have too little of this or too much of this, therefore you have ALS. There's no tests. We don't know why it starts. We don't know why it progresses, and we don't have any tests. And turns out the issue with that is that it's very difficult for drug companies to create therapies when there's no target. Right. So you imagine the COVID ball, which you've all just can imagine now, right? Well, after that got identified, we started having vaccines. We don't have the COVID ball for ALS. And so our charity, what we do, we're pretty simple. We're all volunteers. We have 8 wonderful board members that participate gratis, and I have 4 doctors that do the same. And, we raise funds, and then we identify and sponsor international research collaborations. And to date, we've done about 1.3 million in that work thus far.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Ruth, do you have anything you wanted to ask?
Well, you were talking about there's no test for it, and I was just kind of curious if there's a genetic marker for it, and obviously, I don't know if there is, and if it has anything to do with like hereditary, if it's hereditary or anything like that. I don't have anybody in my family, but it has touched my life with other friends and friends that are as close as family.
Yeah, it's a great question. So of the population that have ALS, less than 10% have a form of ALS that's known as genetic. And there are certain ALS genes that have been identified, SOD1, C9orf, a few others have been identified. That accounts for about 10% of the population. In those cases, when you have familial, because it's genetics, you have that 50-50 chance of passing that gene on to your siblings, right? To your kids. And, I've known some families here in the Bay Area that have lost 6 family members to that disease. And it's tough to take a one person through, and you can imagine that. So unfortunately, that means that 90% of the ALS cases are what they call sporadic ALS, and that just means we don't know why it started, right? And that's the knowledge about where we sit really right now. And so our research is trying to identify those targets. We're trying to understand why that disease progresses. Why does it start? Look for these things called biomarkers, which should also be known as tests for ALS, and bring that to market. Because we really believe that if we can get that information known, right? Why does it start? Why does it progress? Here's some tests for it. That the drug companies will get involved, and they'll spend those billions of dollars of drug research on it. But when I've talked to them before, they just said, Mike, it's too risky. We don't know these things, so we can't really invest a lot in it. So our work is to try to do that basic research, try to understand the disease, and then we want to hand it off to the drug companies and let them create a cure for it.
Wow. Well, I want to thank Carla Brown, by the way, for bringing us all together. I thought that was very great on her part and thoughtful to really think about how to make all this work. So, Carla, I hope you watch this or listen at some point. Let's talk about the show that's coming up. And I'm excited. We're about a month away. And there's going to be 5 guitarists featured. And George, you probably know more about most of these guitarists than me. But I know... I'll just name them off, and then you can tell me what's so special about each one of them. So we have Arlen Roth, who was in Vintage Guitar Magazine's 100 Most Influential Guitarists. Mm-hmm. Jim Soldi, who was in Johnny Cash's band, and Ricky Skaggs and some other well-known artists. Bill Kirchen and Red Volkaert from Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen. Were they both in that band, or was it Bill?
Bill was Commander Cody. Yeah.
Bill was Commander Cody.
So if you've ever gone up the Grapevine, you probably know that song.
Yep.
Hot Rod Lincoln.
Hot Rod Lincoln.
Yeah.
He knew it right away.
Yeah.
And then there's Teisco Del Ray, who was also, I think him and Arlen were both writers too for Guitar Magazine or one of those publications.
Arlen's an educator. He's a performer, educator, teacher, and he put together something called Hot Licks.
Okay, that's what it was.
Which back in the 80s, John Entwistle of The Who was his first. He brought 160 or so of the world's best guitar players in to do the first video educational guitar education videos. Now you can go to YouTube and do it, but back then there was no YouTube. And he put together this video collection with the Who's Who, literally, starting with John Entwistle. Should I?
Yeah, let's talk about all of them. Tell me what you like about them.
Well, these,
or what should we expect?
These were I feel more than touched, and that 2 of them, Arlen Roth and Jim Soldi, are the 2 that play Bowen guitars, and they're primarily electric guitar players. Maybe that's how I had a chance with an acoustic guitar with them. But Arlen is he is the more I learn about him, he reached out. There's quite a story that we don't have time for, but I originally met him when he contacted me to build a guitar for him, and it took a very long time to. There were some setbacks, including the diagnosis and all the testing that Mike just talked about. in the building of Arlen's guitar, but I got to know him personally through many conversations. He was very interested in the building process, and I keep reading about Arlen going, okay, he played for Bob Dylan. He was in Bob Dylan's band. He did 2 or 3 movies with Bob Dylan. He was in Simon and Garfunkel's band and toured the world several times with Simon and Garfunkel, and Paul Simon separately, and Art Garfunkel separately. He gave guitar lessons to Paul Simon. He was doing Saturday Night Live in 1978 or 79 with Art Garfunkel. John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd said, "Hey, Arlen, come up here. Let's goof around before the show." And they did a song. Arlen taught John Belushi how to sing Rocket 88, which has to do with a car. And Arlen's kind of a car guy, too. But and so they wore dark sunglasses and did that.
Oh, no.
That night.
Is that the birth of the Blues Brothers?
That was the birth of the Blues Brothers.
Oh, get out.
No. So, and Arlen knows and has played with, it's hard, I think I've yet to find a person, except Jim Soldi, who hadn't played. So Arlen's played with the rest of the people on the bill. Bill Kirchen is, and these are all wonderfully nice people. Bill's an incredible guitar player. They all tend to play Telecasters with the exception of Teisco, who's kind of he's going to add a different flavor to the show. But Arlen plays every style, and he is a person that you mention his name to a guitar player, and they're going to light up. He's going to be an absolute treat, and the man is the nicest. He is the nicest. He's a wonderful person too, and Jim is. Jim is also primarily an electric guitar. He plays both acoustic and electric guitar, and he started also in San Diego. And I knew him way back when. We were kind of in the same musical circle back then. And he went to Nashville, became a studio musician in Nashville. And Marty Stewart, who was playing in Johnny Cash's band, called Jim and said, can you come down? I've decided I'm going to go out on my own. Marty was Johnny Cash's backup guitar player. Yep. And so Marty said, can you come down, and I want you to meet Johnny? And it turns out it was an audition, but Jim played, I don't know, a song or two. And then Marty says, here's some clothes. There's the bus.
Hit the road.
You're on it.
Go get on the bus. And Jim played with Johnny Cash for 7 or 8 years. And the Carter family, June Carter, and in the course of that, he would play, he'd get billed. Emmylou Harris might open for Johnny Cash. And so, he got to know all the other artists, and has played with a number of them separately as well, and still doing studio work. And then Albert Lee is a name that if you're a guitar player, you know Albert Lee too. Albert Lee he grew up in England with Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and one or two other of the British. Keith Richards. They would all hang out at the same music store, guitar shop, and but the rest of them went into rock. And Albert loved sort of rockabilly country music, and he was a Cricket in Buddy Holly and the Crickets band. And he played for Eric Clapton. He was Eric Clapton's guitarist for a number of years when Eric was out on his own. And Eric has called him the best guitar player in the world. So you have Eric Clapton. Anyway, Jim's a good friend of Albert's. Albert goes to Ricky Skaggs, and if you know country music, Ricky's was a child prodigy of mandolin and all instruments. I mean, he's an incredible player in his own right. And Albert went to Ricky and said, "You got to hire Jim Soldi." So when you have a musician of the stature of Ricky saying, you need Jim in your band, and Jim has played with, he's not Canadian, but he was number one. He was the number one instrumentalist in Canada for one particular year, but he too has played with a vast array of people, and he's if you're watching this and you play the guitar, these are the best guitar players in the world.
I asked Jim when I was talking to him about the show. I couldn't help it. I said, "What was it like to, tour with Johnny Cash?" And the one story he said was when they would walk through the airport, and Johnny's always in this long black jacket.
Yeah,
and he's a big, towering guy. Like it was like people parted the Red Sea for him, and it was this, and you're just behind him, and everyone.
Wow.
He just had this presence, and I think that's what impressed him the most. Is like everywhere he went, people just moved away or moved out of his way.
He had an aura,
but in a good way. Yeah,
yeah.
He had this aura.
Yeah, he did. Bill Kirchen, we briefly touched on. He's done far more than Commander Cody. He's a studio musician in his own right. He's played on a bunch of other albums. A fabulous guitarist. Extremely funny. He believes in entertaining the audience, and if we're fortunate enough, and I have a feeling we will be, we'll get to hear Hot Rod Lincoln like we've never heard it before. Red Volkaert played with Merle Haggard. He was Merle Haggard's guitar player, and it's funny. I asked Jim, "Have you ever played with Red?" And he said, "No, but I was touring in Norway, and Red went on just before we went on. So I don't know if it was with Ricky Skaggs or with Johnny Cash, but so they were on the same stage in the same place in Norway together, but they've never actually played together. But Red is." He has an incredible voice, a unique style, stylistically, and he's coming from Australia. He's touring in Australia just before he comes to do our show. So
it's a long commute.
It's a long commute, and then Teisco is he played briefly in the Ventures. He's it's sort of a mix of Austin meets the Beach Boys. He has his own flavor of surf music, and he has a split. He's really two people. He's Teisco Del Ray, and I'm not sure what to call him. He's the most interesting person to talk to because his along with his performing, which will add a different flavor to the show, and he's an extremely accomplished player as well. He's also a journalist. He's the editor of Vintage Guitar Magazine, and he was editor of Guitar Player Magazine, and he has interviewed George Harrison, Eric Clapton, on and on. So I had a call with him the other day and looked at my watch, and we were 2 hours into it.
And still plenty to go.
and still funny to go.
Yeah.
And there will be a few surprises in the show too. But there'll be solo work by these individual artists. You'll get to hear them do their, I'm sure there'll be a Johnny Cash song and a Merle Haggard song and we'll hear something from. I know we'll hear some Simon and Garfunkel. We'll hear some Bob Dylan. Arlen's already told me a few of the songs he's planning on doing. So they're going to be playing music from the artists that they played with, and then doing some things together too, which will be really special.
This sounds like a night like we would be lucky to get just one of them, and to get 5 of these extraordinary guitar players on one night on the same stage.
And there's a backup band too.
And a backup band.
And a backup band. And the backup band are no slouches either. It's a fabulous band, 4-person band. It is.
It's Jim's band, right?
It's Jim's band.
Yeah.
It's also Richie Furay's band from founder of Buffalo Springfield and Poco. So they do their own gigs as a band, and then when Richie goes out on the road, they go out with him, backing him up. So yeah, it rarely on a stage do you have this many guitarists of this stature.
Yeah. Well, our goal is to sell it out, so we're going to try and fill this house, and there's ways to support the event too.
Absolutely.
Right, Mike? So
I think that's just a great way to lead in. When I think I get mesmerized just listening to this, right? And we can imagine what a concert it's going to be. But one of the things that's unique about this event that we've done is for those people that sponsor, their sponsorships available. There's going to be an opportunity before the concert to meet these guys and mingle with them. And so you imagine having 5 of these gentlemen and the stories that they would be able to tell you, and that be able to do that interaction is I think is this, they're both going to be wonderful, but I'm just looking forward to the pre-event as well as the performance.
And we're going to have some things to auction off, and a lot of guitar related stuff. And so I think I've noticed this is a guitar community. Heavy guitar fans here. So I think a lot of people would really be interested in coming out to see this and participate.
So far, a lot of people have.
Ticket sales have been good.
Ticket sales have been great, and
they're going. I think that's marvelous. We're gonna purchase some guitars, and there'll be opportunities to get some of these gentlemen to sign them and take them away. I'm also bringing a special one that was given to our charity a little while back from Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. And I have a Fender guitar signed by the entire Pearl Jam band that we're going to live auction as well.
Wonderful.
At the event. So again, all that's
you can just leave that in my office.
I know what Chris is bidding on.
I might not have enough money for that one. Well, and then I want to go back to just to kind of circle back to the guitar part of your life, and you make these acoustic guitars. Is there? And I as a good fan of the guitar, I know, especially the acoustic guitar, they're all unique and different and personalized. And for you, is there a style that you like to do, or I don't want to spend hours talking about this, but I know you could, you start with the wood and then you go from there, and kind of tell me a little bit about the guitars that you make.
We've talked before. That's what I picked up on that cue. We don't want to go take hours talking about it because I could. But one description of a luthier is someone who starts with a piece of wood and takes everything away that's not a guitar. And you have a guitar left. But the wood has a lot to do with it. And there are factory guitars, and then there are custom guitars. And custom-made guitars really were not available until the late 70s, maybe 1980s, when builders began to make guitars that they could actually sell and compete with Martin at that point in time. That was before Taylor entered the market. There was Martin and Gibson made acoustic guitars, and Guild and a few other makers. But I was curious as a guitar player about how does the sound, how does it work? It was a curiosity in me, and I thought if I can understand how the guitar works, that will help me in my playing, and it has. I'm fortunate enough to have some very close friends who are some of the best builders, and arguably one who is certainly his guitars are in the most demand. For example, James Taylor only plays Jim Olson's guitars. Mm-hmm. Jim is a close friend of mine, and he's done a lot. He's given me a lot of help along the way in learning how to build, and always picks up the phone and, Jim, I got a problem with this or that, and he'll put down the guitar he's making for Sting, for example, and his guitars. Paul Stanley just bought one. John Mayer, Sting, Paul McCartney's autobiography has him on the cover with one of Jim's guitars. Paul Simon plays one in his concert. It's the only guitar that James Taylor plays or Jim's guitars, and the list goes on and on of Stephen Stills, David Crosby had at least one of Jim's guitars. So he's helped me a lot. But you start with wood, and the backs and sides tend to come from low altitude tropical places, and the tops tend to come from higher altitude. Mm-hmm. It's a generalization, but they don't tend to come from the same place. And the ecological concerns are a growing concern, that we don't want to deplete the forests of these rare and special woods. So fortunately, there are laws in place that protect the woods, and consequently, a lot of the wood that I have is very, very old, which predated a concern for our environment.
Yeah, right.
And each piece of wood is different, so there is no cookie cutter way. There's no uniform thickness to it. I let the wood tell me how thick it wants to be, and you hold enough wood and tap enough wood and flex it, and you begin to let the wood. It begins to communicate with you of how stiff it wants the bracing to be and how thick it wants to be and all that. But I tend to make an OM model, which is an orchestra model. Mm-hmm. It's a medium-sized guitar, and it is the perfect guitar for recording because it has the lows and the highs, but it's not necessarily the loudest guitar if you're going to play it unmiked. Mm-hmm. It records. They record well, and that's what I put into the guitars to maybe come to the show, and you'll see some of them, and grab me, and we can talk more about it then, rather than taking the time now.
Well, I have a question. What kind of woods do you like to work with for the body and then for the neck?
Okay, I'm building 6 more, and I'm fighting this disease.
Yeah.
When you're diagnosed, they tell you you have no hope, and maybe it needs to be said that virtually every other disease you get, they tell you, well, there's a tiny bit of hope. You've got this really bad type of cancer, but there's a tiny bit of hope. But they do tell you there's no hope when they diagnose you. At least that's what I was told. And but I just can't accept that. There's always hope, and and none of us know how many days we have. What I do know is that I need to make the most of today, and this concert is part of that. That we're all here, and we can waste every day of our life, and I don't know how many days I have. I hope I'm on the longer end of the scale, or I hope I'm long enough that we find a cure.
Yeah.
But I'm building 6 more guitars, and the woods I've chosen for those are my favorites. So I've named each guitar. I had orders. I canceled the orders. I said I'm very sorry, but I don't want your deposit. I don't want a deadline. I'm going to build these guitars, and I don't know what I'm going to face along the way. I'm losing strength in my hands and legs, and feeling the effects of the disease. But these are 2 of the guitars are the backs and sides are Brazilian rosewood, which is highly sought after. It's very expensive. 2 of them are koa, which is one of the most, probably the most beautiful wood. The koa that I have is the best of the best. I was working with it last night. In fact, it's absolutely gorgeous wood. It's Hawaiian wood.
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful wood.
It's beautiful wood.
It's very striking.
One other is from a very unique tree. There's one tree called the tree. It is famous. National Geographic did a story. Look it up. The tree. It's a Honduran mahogany cut down in about 1979, and it is highly figured. It's the most rare and expensive anyway. And then the last one is African blackwood. It's a dark wood, and that I'm the top for that is extremely rare. The top from that guitar, most of the tops I use alpine rosewood or European spruce rather, either that or red spruce, which is also called Adirondack spruce. So they're either European alpine spruce, but this particular top comes from the beams that made the ceiling of the Munich Cathedral, which through dendrochronology, the tree sprouted in 1081. In about 1470, it was cut down by peasants in the Alps and floated down the river to build the beams of the Frauenkirche in Munich. Bombed in 1944, and built into a guitar in 2023.
Wow.
So it's very, very old wood. It'll be a unique. I have the last of it too. So that'll be a special guitar.
That's so amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's like this. I always think of guitars as like living objects, and it came from a tree, so this tree lived 1,000 years ago, lived another life as at a church.
400 years of music.
And it went into this. And then it's made its way to you. And then it's going to be this instrument where it will still sing.
And it will live on.
And it'll live on and carry your voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's such a great story.
So, my goal is, the goal for my guitar is to bring joy. This is not, I'm not out to make a fortune on doing this. I really want to make the very best guitars that I can make and put my soul into them, which I really do.
Absolutely.
Every chisel stroke, every little thing that I do is intended to infuse my desire for more joy in this world that desperately needs more joy, which is what the audience will get a big dose of at our concert. So if there's an empty seat, that's a person who's missed out on a lot of joy.
There will be a lot of joy. It's so exciting to just see, your approach, to life. And when I took Gretchen through our journey, after she was diagnosed, she called it the day of the bomb drop. But, was what you look at is, hey, let's make every day the best day we can make it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so inspiring to see you do that with something you love. Right. I think it's just fantastic.
Well, was there anything else you wanted to say?
Nope. This is not a commercial for the guitars.
Well, I just want to thank you both and Ruth, and I'm so glad we could come together and make this happen. And for anybody that's interested in coming out to see this and participate, it is March 15th, Wednesday, March 15th at 7:30 at the Bankhead Theater in downtown Livermore. And you can get tickets online at livermorearts.org. And there's also information about sponsorship. If you want to be a sponsor, you want to get more involved, there's ways to get a hold of us and find out how you can do that and support George, and then support Mike and the ALS Cure Project. And I love how it's called the Cure Project.
Yeah. Cure projects means they have a beginning and the end.
Yeah.
And our end is a cure.
So,
and then when that ends, I go fishing. So we shut down the Cure Project and Mike goes fishing. So that's our goal.
Let's get Mike fishing then,
Yeah,
right?
well,
So let's get Mike fishing and George building guitars for a long time.
Yeah. So thank you both. And we look forward to
Thanks, Chris and Ruth.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing everyone there.
Right.
Thank you.